Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our reactions to the Brazilian Grand Prix sprint race, a race which may be championship defining. We shall get into all that and more in just a little bit. Before we do, remember to like and subscribe, and of course a huge shout out to our members: Dakota the Joyous Jane, Robin Myers, Cinnamon Strudel, Michael Johnson, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Philip Duganzik, Sarah Jowett and Andy Jones. If you want to become a member, click the link in the description down below, either on YouTube or on our Patreon. But let's get into this now with the grid that was established yesterday after the sprint qualifying, which unfortunately I was unable to watch live, but we're here now for the rest of the weekend. We'll have full coverage of qualifying later on today and the race tomorrow. It is our new World Championship leader, Lando Norris, on pole for the sprint, with a surprise Kimi Antonelli alongside him. Oscar Piastri is second place in the World Championship. He starts this race in third. Then it was Russell, Alonso and Max Verstappen down in sixth place after what had been a very disappointing qualifying for him. The only changes to the grid from yesterday's session were both Sainz and Tsunoda, who had disappointing qualifyings, starting from the pit lane. Carlos Sainz, who qualified 20th, moved to the pit lane after a car setup. Yuki Tsunoda very much being used as a Max Verstappen setup test for this race, as the teams can change setups between now and main qualifying. Red Bull trying to find out what makes their car tick the best in order to try and get the most for Verstappen later on today. It has been raining overnight in Brazil. It had stopped before the sprint race. There were still some wet patches here and there, and on the outlaps we did see some cars go out on dry tyres, some cars go out on wets, but by the time we get to the main race, everyone is on dry tyres, although there are little puddles here and there, which we shall get onto in a little bit. For the start of the race, though, it's Antonelli, Russell, Verstappen, Leclerc, Hajar and Albon on the softs, everyone else on the mediums. And as we get going, it was a very good start from Lando Norris, especially considering he had Antonelli alongside him on the softer compound tyre. Max Verstappen is able to jump Alonso and move up from there and put pressure onto George Russell. But into turn 4, Behrman and Lawson have some contact. Now, Behrman did push Lawson out a bit wide on the straights, Lawson on the grass. They're side by side going into turn 1. They have the contact and Behrman spins. It was later ruled out to be a racing incident. The FIA decides to not activate DRS on lap 2. They move on to lap 3, and when we got onto lap 3, Lando Norris broke DRS from Kimi Antonelli and basically ran away from there for a few laps. But then nothing really happened. It was a very, very quiet race until we got to around about lap 7, and all of a sudden Oscar Piastri is in the wall. We see on a replay he just kind of went hard on a curb, just went a bit too far over the line. There was a puddle of water within the curb, hidden in secret, touched that, completely lost control of the car and went into the wall. It also happened with Hülkenberg and Colapinto. Kimi Antonelli on his radio says that Lando Norris was the one who initially hit it and put more water onto the track, which could have also caused it as well. Overall, just a massive racing incident, no one to blame, of course, but it does mean that Oscar Piastri is out of the race, as was Franco Colapinto. Nico Hülkenberg was able to continue. It does bring out a safety car. That safety car is very quickly turned into a red flag. A wonderful job, though, from the Sauber team, who managed to replace Hülkenberg's rear wing during the red flag period. So great job from that team. But yeah, just going back to Oscar Piastri, because that's the big headline of this race, that Oscar Piastri is out. No points for him in the sprint race, and McLaren have got a hell of a job to do between now and qualifying to fix that car. Oscar Piastri's awful end-of-season form just seems to continue. You think at some point it's got to stop, but at the minute, it's not. It was a good qualifying for him in third. Obviously, off the pace of his teammate, but considering where he qualified for something like Mexico, far improved in comparison. But here, it was just a silly little mistake. you can't point too much of blame on it because it's just one of those things that happens when the track is slightly damp. It happens, but it didn't used to happen to Oscar Piastri. The man was just made of stone, is what I used to say about him. But yeah, ever since Baku, well, not even Baku, ever since he won the Dutch Grand Prix, it's just been constant. I mean, let me just pull up some of the races that we've had just to make sure I don't miss any here. But if we think about it, after Baku, we went to the Italian Grand Prix, where, of course, was just off the pace of Lando entirely, and then there was the whole team order thing. Then from the Italian Grand Prix, we go to Baku, and we all know what happened there. Just a massive calamity, constantly, just mistake after mistake, jumping the starts, having a bad crashing in qualifying firstly, and then I'm trying to find the bloody calendar here whilst I'm talking. F1 calendar. Yeah, so crashing in qualifying, jumping the start, crashing again in the race. Then from Baku, we went to Singapore, where again there was the incident between the two of them into turn 2, which, as I said at the time, and I still believe to this day, was really just not an incident at all and was massively overblown. But from there, just was not on the pace of Lando for the entirety of the race. Then we go to Austin. There's the crash that happened between the two of them. We go to Mexico. Has no pace whatsoever. Now here we are in Brazil, and again, another crash. Back-to-back sprint races where Oscar Piastri has scored no points. Since he won the Dutch Grand Prix, he hasn't had a good race. It's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 6th race now. Of course, could completely save it between now and the end of the weekend. It still is incredibly possible that we leave Brazil with Oscar Piastri as the championship leader. That still can happen. But on the current form that he's had, 5 race weekends in a row where he's just been dreadful. He's been outscored by Lando Norris at every single one. He's been outscored by Max Verstappen at every single one. And here we are again, and he's already on the back foot in the closing stages of this championship. A championship which, after the Dutch Grand Prix, I was saying, is that championship over? Many people were saying, that is championship over. Lando Norris' engine explodes. Oscar Piastri dominates the race and gets a good victory. Yes, since then, it has been bad race after bad race after bad race after bad race after bad race. And now, what is he, 9 points now? It was 1 point, the difference between them going into this sprint race. He is now 9 points behind Lando Norris. I think the gap between him and Max is 30 points. And on the current form, they said that the championship was a 2-horse race between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. At this rate, Oscar Piastri is going to come third in a 2-horse race because Max is still gaining on him. Now, Max didn't have a good race either. We'll get into that more in a bit. Moving on to the restart here, and it's a rolling start, which makes no sense whatsoever. It wasn't raining. It wasn't wet. There was no indication of, for me, any reason to have a rolling start. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would be saying, the FIA obviously want Lando Norris to win the title, so they're protecting him here and giving him an easy start to make sure he keeps the lead. I do not think that's the reason it happened. I think the reason it happened is because the FIA are boring and inept at their job and hate racing. There's no reason for that to be a rolling start whatsoever. Should have been a standing start. We already had one at the start of the race. Went fine. It's more exciting, more entertaining things could have possibly happened, but the FIA are allergic to fun, so they give us a rolling start. Lando Norris leaving it incredibly late to go. Basically, on the safety car line, he starts off again. George Russell tries to dive around the outside of Kimi Antonelli. I feel for Mercedes as a team, that's a huge mistake, because now Kimi Antonelli off that restart has to defend from George Russell. And a lap later, when DRS is activated, Kimi is already over a second behind Lando. If George had maybe waited and allowed Kimi to kind of just go through his lap, maybe he would have been within DRS. And we saw, as this race went on, Kimi cut that gap further down and further down and further down. maybe without that move from George, he's already there and can put pressure on from the start, and possibly we get a Mercedes winner to this race. But George is a racer. He sees a gap, he's going to go for it. So there you go. Verstappen, dreadful start. It looks like Red Bull did make a slight setup change for Verstappen during the red flag, which they are able to do because Parc Ferme is over once the race has begun. So they did make a slight setup change for him. Something else with this restart as well, especially for the guys at the front of the grid. Basically, if they were on the softs, they went to the mediums. If they were on the mediums, they went to the softs. So Lando Norris, who started on the mediums in the main race, at the start of the race, is now on the softs, and vice versa for the Mercedes lads and for Max Verstappen. Verstappen really struggling to get those tyres ready, and also was under a lot of pressure from Alonso. Into the first corner, Alonso is alongside Verstappen. Verstappen tries to take a very short line through the first corner, but Russell cuts across after fighting from Antonelli. Verstappen nearly hits the back of him, has to go wide to avoid Russell, which allows Alonso to get right onto the back of Verstappen again. There's a little battle between them going into turn 3, turn 4, in that long straight in the first sector. But Verstappen is able to keep that from there. Now, Verstappen does eventually pull away from Alonso, and Alonso now at the head of a very big train under a lot of pressure from Charles Leclerc. And now Antonelli's on those mediums, Lando on the softs. That turnover does happen, the changeover happens when the mediums are the faster tyres. Lando seems to be suffering with the rear tyres. Antonelli at one point cuts nearly half a second out of Lando's lead in just one lap. Really good stuff from Antonelli. And is within DRS. But again, at this point, we're watching it, and every time it seems he goes into Sector 3 about 6-7 tenths behind Lando, and yes, he has DRS, but he's never really able to fully get him, and we see at the exact same time with Leclerc and Alonso, Leclerc in that Ferrari, much faster than Alonso was, but wasn't able to pass him until lap 22 or 24. So the writing was really on the wall, unless Lando made a mistake. But yeah, Lando managed that gap really, really well. Was under pressure from Kimi Antonelli, but managed to keep the lead. On the final lap, though, there is a huge crash for Gabriel Bortoleto. We see him try and dive down the inside of Alexander Albon, and as he comes across to the left to make that dive, just completely loses the car, hits the pit wall, then is basically thrown up into the air, thrown across the track. Albon was very lucky to not be taken out by the car just flying through the air. Then he crashes into the other wall on the outside of turn 1. Big crash for him. Thankfully, he says he's okay. The unfortunate thing for Albon, who I think was a P11 at this point, the front wing of Bortoleto's car got stuck underneath his car, completely destroyed his race on the last lap from there. But as we cross the line, it is Lando Norris who picks up the sprint victory and the 8 points. Kimi Antonelli not too far behind. A very good sprint race from Kimi Antonelli. If Russell hadn't have fought him, could he have won? Possibly, but I think Lando just managed that gap really well. Nothing to be taken away from Lando there. Great stuff. George Russell is in third, completing George Russell things of turning up, doing nothing, having a podium. Max Verstappen had to settle for 4th place. Good start to get past Alonso, and I think his pace at the end was very good. His last few laps, his pace was up there with Lando, if not faster on some laps. But I think that start, where he had to avoid Russell, then he was fighting Alonso, that cost him so much time, and there wasn't enough laps to make it up from there. So hopefully for the Verstappen fans, Red Bull have got some good data here to change the car, because they ran 2 setups on Verstappen's car for this race. Who knows how many setup changes Tsunoda had as well. So they should have some good data here to put the car in a good direction for main qualifying later on today. But yeah, only 4th for him. Leclerc is in 5th. Fernando Alonso does a good job to secure 6th place. Lewis Hamilton in 7th, was very close to Alonso at the end, but I think they did call safety car after the Bortoleto incident so that he couldn't fight Alonso from there. But my God, maybe driver of the day is in 8th. Pierre Gasly has scored a point for the Alpine team. Unbelievable stuff. Great drive from Gasly for P8. Stroll just misses out in P9. Hajar is 10th. Ocon is 11th, it's Behrman in 12th, Lawson 13th, Tsunoda 14th, Carlos Sainz is 15th, Hulkenberg in 16th, Albon, as I said, he was up like 11th, 12th-ish until that incident with Bortoleto where the front wing was stuck underneath the car. Bortoleto does not finish the race but will be classified as 18th. Then there are two DNFs. DNFs. It is our former championship leader, Oscar Piastri, and the man who has just signed a new contract with Alpine to stay into 2026 is Franco Colapinto, DNF as well. A very interesting race, a huge points haul from Lando Norris. Again, I said this when after the Austin sprint, when it was both McLarens out and Max won. I imagine he's thinking, well, I wish that could have happened tomorrow rather than today to get more points. But still, a now 9-point lead at the top of the championship for Lando Norris. We will be back later on for all things qualifying for our main Grand Prix later on. I shall see you then. Until then, have a good one. Goodbye.